Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Liberation Podcast. Today we will be discussing, analyzing, and reviewing Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. If you didn't know, in eastern Kentucky there was some major flash flooding, mudslides, and then freezing, all that happened within the span of a few days. Kristen reached out to a local mutual aid organization that is raising money for multiple families and people in the community who are affected by this devastating weather. We will link their Cash App, PayPal, and Instagram below. Please donate if you're able to. For more content outside of the podcast, please check out our Instagram and TikTok at Literary Liberation and Twitter at LitLibPodcast. I'm your co-host, Mariah, and you can find me at Hungry Rye on all social media platforms.
And I'm your co-host, Kristen. You can find me at KRXXTXN on all social media platforms. And welcome to our final episode on the Hunger Games. Hopefully.
I can't believe it's here.
I made you something,
It's
Mariah.
happening.
It's your dinner. Hold on. Is it going to
It's
focus?
my dinner?
Yeah. It's backwards, but... For those listening, it's a plate that says your words on it. I made it for Mariah for dinner because she's going to eat them.
If you haven't listened
to the last
to the previous 2 episodes, or I made a TikTok recently talking about Sunrise on the Reaping, I was this book's biggest hater. I thought it was a money grab. Anyways, I ended up really enjoying it.
Yeah.
So I was very surprised. I was surprised with how this ended up turning out. We had been plotting and thinking what could possibly be happening in this book, why Suzanne Collins would write it, and I think we have a more clear idea of what's exactly going on here. So if you were wondering, if you're reading this, which I know some people who are reading this have never read the Hunger Games before, which is fascinating.
Are reading this book? Yeah, that's honestly, I think that's stupid. I think you need to read every other book before you read this. Even Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which Mariah says is trash, I do think it's kind of relevant for some of the references that are in this book.
For the lore, yes. Definitely, like, there is things you can take out of it. At minimum, you have to read the trilogy. I would be hard-pressed to say, just read this one first.
No, do not read it in...
the impact
the only thing I could think is if you're reading this in, like, true chronological order, like, starting with The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and reading this would be only if you've read the series before. To do, like, a chronological read-through. Like, I feel like that could be something to do that, but if not, if you've never read any Hunger Games, you need to be reading them in publication order. I think that's the definitive order.
And I feel like if you should know. Most people know who this person... Apparently, on the internet, people who do like the Hunger Games didn't know whose story this was. I went on threads and someone was like, "Who's Haymitch?" I was like, "I think you need to do a reread or reflect on... This is like a central character." Anyways, this is following the 50th annual Hunger Games.
Quarter Quell.
Haymitch's story.
I guess, is this still considered a Quell?
Well, yeah. I think it's one of, like, the Quells.
Yeah, because there's 3 Quarter Quells that I guess ended up happening throughout the series. The 25th, which we don't really know that much about. We just know that because they each have, like, special little things that are different than the typical games. So the 25th one, the districts, like, the people in the districts had to vote who the tributes were going to be. They picked the children themselves. This one is double the tributes. And then the last Quarter Quell, spoiler alert, I guess if you haven't read the Hunger Games, is the 75th one. And that's one where people that have already been reaped have the opportunity to be reaped again.
Like, that is the backdrop for this book. If you were wondering about Suzanne Collins' politics, who she is as a person, go listen to the first, 20 minutes of the first installation of this series that Chris and I decided to do. So that's where we cover a lot of who Suzanne Collins is, other works she's had. We're not going to get into that for this. We're going to try to just yap because this book has just come out. Today is March 23rd, so very recently, within the week. I believe it came out on Tuesday, so we are in 5 days.
It'll be a little bit a week after whenever this gets posted, I think. Because this will be posted this Thursday after. Which I just want to say, because Mariah and other people were saying, "Oh, like this book isn't going to be a big deal. Nobody's going to be talking about it. Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes wasn't that big." Who is having another plate of their words for dinner?
Very surprised with how many people are actually like, I knew people would read it. I didn't think it would catch on. I think the first couple reviews that started coming out really gained a lot of hype for it too, and it just has exploded. It's kind of crazy. I did not anticipate this happening because I don't know. I feel like A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was just fine. Like the movie came out and stuff, people were excited, but then I don't know, it died down.
I don't think the hype for the Hunger Games is ever going to be like dead though. And as of today recording too, it's already got 72,000 ratings on Goodreads, which is like a lot for Goodreads if you think about, cuz a lot of the books that we end up reviewing, they probably typically I would say this is like on the higher end because like the most popular books probably have like a million ratings, I would say, on Goodreads, right? But the fact that this book is not even a week old at this point and it's already almost at 100,000, where there's other books like I think Eileen we did last week had this many reviews and that book has been out since 2015 or whatever.
Yeah, and so far, this book, and I can't see it going down, has 21,000 reviews, 4.73 stars, highest rating
Hunger Games
Hunger
book.
Game book in Suzanne Collins' repertoire, however you wanna call it, her collection. It's just this is her highest rated book. It's kind of crazy.
I think it's Mariah's
That's a
favorite
really high score.
Hunger Games book too. I will say I liked it. I don't think I liked it as much as everyone else did, personally. I'm still a Catching Fire girly in my heart. I like Catching Fire more than I like this. But I think that's because of it being Haymitch's games and we already knew the outcome, like, you get the highlight like, obviously, you don't learn about, like because there's this ends up exploring a lot of topics of propaganda and a lot of the stuff that, like, Peeta and Katniss ended up seeing, like, in their, like, replay of the games is not exactly what ended up happening in, like, this book. So it's not entirely the same, but a lot of, like, the main highlight points we already know, and I feel like because we already knew like that, there was no reason for me to like get emotionally attached to these characters because I'm like, well, they're all dead by the time like if they're already dead by like the original trilogy, I know, or if they're not, then I already know what happens to them later, like whatever, like how their life plays out pretty much, you know? So I feel like that's why I wasn't super into it. But I think if you like if you're somebody who like lives, breathes, and dies the Hunger Games, you'll probably love this. And that's why like I can see why people
What's your rating?
I give it 4 stars.
Like a flat 4 stars?
Yeah, like, it was entertaining, but it wasn't, like, something, like because like, Mariah was the one that was like, "Oh, I'm not gonna be able to read this, blah, blah, blah." Mariah finished this, like, way before I did,
I finished it within the first 48 hours of it coming out. I binge read
and I
it.
finished it yesterday,
I
so
Yeah. So, definitely different. Our ratings aren't too far apart. I gave it a 4.5. It's definitely not like a perfect five-star book. However, I think it may be one of the best Suzanne Collins books that
we
she has,
haven't
like, written. Like, if I were to rank them, that it would probably rank really high. I don't know if it would be above, like, Catching Fire or if it would be below it, but I really enjoy it. I think it's written really well, and I like how the politics are a little bit more fleshed out in this than in the previous book. That being said, they're still relatively ambiguous because it's not making completely direct connections to US politics. I know a lot of
no.
people are saying it is. However, I've seen some really dog shit takes on like what exactly it's supposed to be representing with propaganda and stuff. So, we'll get into that with the spoilers, but I think both of us would recommend it. Like if you
Yeah,
read
if you
Hunger
like
Games,
Hunger Games,
read this.
you will love it. You'll eat it up. And that's, like because I do think there is, like, a bit of a critique about this being, like, fan servicey, and, like, I can agree to an extent, but it's also, like what else are these characters doing? We know they're relevant by the time they get to the main trilogy. So like obviously there's got to be something like these stones have to be laid, you know? And maybe I guess people are wishing that maybe it wasn't so like clearly laid out for the trilogy where they could have left some characters like more ambiguous until then, which like yes, but also like it makes sense to me why Like, some characters, like, we can talk about in the spoilers, like, whenever they got introduced, it was like eye roll, but then other characters, I'm like, "Yeah, it makes sense that they're here, like, I understand their connection to this."
I felt like this one compared to A Bout of Songbirds and Snakes, that felt really like fan servicey to me. Like it wasn't as fleshed out. It did feel like people's names were getting dropped for whatever. This felt like more of the thread. I think somebody else described this as like the thread that's binding all of the books together. So you're getting these names.
Yeah.
They're relevant because it's within like the same like lifetime of the
Mhm.
main trilogy. So it felt like there are instances where it's silly, like, "Oh, catching fire. Oh,
Yeah.
wink, wink."
"Oh, I
And
left
it's
my
just like,
bag in the
"Oh, you are
Katniss
being so for
flowers."
fucking real."
Then you're like, "Okay,
Yeah.
we get it.
So there's some
Yeah."
silly moments, but I don't know if that's just also it's YA, so
Yeah.
it's kind of inevitable.
But it is gory for YA. Like, it is violent.
Incredibly gory. Oh my god. A lot of people are saying that
They think
if
it's gonna be a
like, 'cause
rated
this is gonna be a
R.
film, it's gonna be rated R,
No.
otherwise they're gonna have to get rid of a lot of the points and sanitize it, which would be ironic because of the subject content of the book.
That's what they're gonna do,
Um
though. There's no because you have to think rated R movie like, the thing is, it's like whether or not people want to consume this in a way that they do, this is a franchise. It's making companies money. Lionsgate, like, I literally saw a TikTok today. Did you know there's a Hunger Games theme park? So, there's a Hunger Games theme park.
It's
This book, like, yes, Susan Collins is presenting, like, an idea and things like that, like, books are political, we understand that. But it's also, like, there are so many corporate figureheads that are probably gonna be making so much money off of this movie, and rated R movies do not make as much money as PG-13 movies do. That's, like, a fact, because they're much more restrictive, children can't go see them on their own, like, Deadpool and Wolverine was, like, the first time, like, a rated R movie was, like, one of the highest grossing films, like, in, like, 10 years or something, and that just came out last year, and so, like, you have to look at, like, the context of it. This, especially if it with it being, like, a YA book, they will not be doing a rated R movie. I can guarantee you that, and they will cut things that they don't view as profitable. That's how capitalism works, y'all, you know?
it's kinda like the commodification of Squid Games, which
Yeah.
is, like, another, like, moment where this you got Squid Games Roblox, you've got Squid Games
They, like,
figure
remade
like, costumes.
the reality show of Squid Games, like, taking
Mr. Beast.
yeah, well, I don't think Mr. Beast did it, but then they also had, like I think Netflix had their own did they do, like, a reality thing with it, I think?
Yeah, they did I don't know if it was the Mr. Beast one. I
I
thought they
think
did
they
a
were
version
separate.
too.
I think they did their own, where it's like
It
yeah,
was crazy.
but
Anyway,
so
so we don't get too far off track. We're
but
getting into the spoilers, so hopefully you've read it, and if not,
hey, this is
too
early
bad.
on,
You're here. You're locked in.
15 minutes in. Okay. Moving on to the specific spoilers, I will say okay, so since we're in the specific spoiler zone, the specific thing that made me roll my eyes because I think most of the characters being introduced were fine until it got to Effie. That was when I got pissed off for real. This is, like, pissing me off for real because, like, the way that her character was is, like, yeah, she was dumb, yeah, she was stupid, which is how she's portrayed in that, but it's like, she doesn't really need to be here, like, she could just, like it was literally fan service to introduce her because, like, the role that she played was not important enough, I think, to be, like, already an established character later on, you know?
Yeah, I don't know if they did that as a means of, like, doing an Effie story or what. It felt very strange. It was very weird to just insert. I wouldn't have made that decision,
No.
but
But yeah, that was, like, my main, like, one because, like, it's also too, like, the where it happens in the story, it's, like, name after name after name dropping, you know? Because you get, like Haymitch was actually best friends with Katniss's parents, which, like, makes sense because, like, Haymitch is supposed to be from the seam, and so is Katniss's father, so, like, it makes sense in that sense, but then it's also like but also he was friendly with her mom, where it's like, "Okay, but, like" now looking at, like, the class dynamics too to why, like, Katniss's mother decides to go live in the seam for true love, because, like, that never happens, and, like, that is distinctly talked about. And then, like, it talks about too how, like, Katniss's father's family on his mother's side is related to the Cubby family too.
Yeah, there's a lot of crossover and
And that's why I think, like
I don't think it's bad,
it's just
but it is,
corny.
like, just Hunger Games lore,
It's, like,
and
corny kind of
yeah.
feeling, I think. Like, which is fine if you like a little cheese. If you That's why, like, why I'm saying, like, if you're a super big fan, like, if you gobble up the Hunger Games, you will eat this up, I think. But I was surprised at the overall messaging and, like, how it ended up focusing a lot more on propaganda, and it made a lot of people realize too that even, like, whenever we look at, like, the Hunger Games trilogy, you kind of view as that, like, being, like, the initial spark of, like, the revolution, when I think this is a really great job at, like, contextualizing, like, true revolutionary movements and about how they're really, like, years and years of work and people educating and working together and building, like, that solidarity within a base group before you're able to actually do anything of substance or, like, viewed as substance to the regular people.
Probably one of the more important themes that has been presented throughout this entire I don't know, would you call it a franchise?
Yeah, I'd say it's a
I guess,
franchise. Series.
is you're seeing throughout all of them that despite a revolution being stifled and being punished, the will to persevere and to liberate yourselves will always take precedent. Like, it'll never completely be subjugated. Like, you can kill a person, but you can't kill an idea.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I think that's a really relevant thing that is explored throughout this, is that not only do revolutions and liberation do not occur
Overnight.
overnight, but even if they, like, they get stifled by some means of just, like, the oppressing class having the upper hand in some way,
Being
that's a
militarized
relevant
or
thing
yeah.
because so often are we met with critiques online, specifically, it's always chronically online individuals who will be like, "Oh, well,
"What are
where's
you
your
guys doing?"
revolution? Why
Yeah.
aren't you revolutionizing?" It's like, I don't think you understand the nuances. If you can understand the nuances of the Hunger Games and why it's taken
75 years.
85 years.
75.
Is it 75?
Yeah,
Oh,
because
you did
the
I guess it is. I
75th
don't know why I
annual
thought it
Hunger
was an
Games.
extra 10 years. 75 years after who knows how long before that with, like, their revolutionary
'Cause
forces
they
in District 13 leading up, like, that's a long time.
Well, because we don't really know anything about, like, prior because we only know that, like, the capital had power in the first place, like, before Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. We know that the capital had some type of power over the districts as well, but they weren't doing the Hunger Games, and then there was still, like, with District 13 that they still wanted to rebel and have their own government take place because they were still getting the short end of the stick of the people that lived in the capital, even if it wasn't necessarily like, "Oh, you're being sacrificed for the Hunger Game for entertainment every year." No, it was, "We're still giving you the shit resources and we're still extracting all of your profit," very similarly to what the United States does to other parts of the world, you know? And so then these people rebel, and because they decided to rebel to fight back, the way that the capital is like, "Oh, we're actually gonna keep showing our power," is by, 1, destroying District 13 where it's blown off the map, nobody knows about it anymore, and then also having, like, this retaliation to, I guess, try to prevent people from building any idea of solidarity or rebellion or anything like that through the games by admitting fear into these people.
Yeah, it's basically the embodiment of the ideas presented in Mark Fisher's Capitalism Realism. Like, this is the real way it is. There's no alternative. You can only kinda work within the system that you're given.
Mhm.
Which I thought was a really nice touch, and that if people thought that was a really cool theme or interesting aspect to this, you should probably check that out. Like, there's a lot of different instances, or, like, political ideas and topics that end up coming up, or commentary, I suppose, like political commentary, that you can find nonfiction books to read that explore stuff that has happened, like,
In
in
real
real
life.
life and analyzed it, that you should also want to read. Like, do not limit your analysis of the world to the Hunger Games.
No.
I'm begging you all, please, please do extra reading after this. You cannot just be like, I'm literally Katniss Everdeen, I'm literally Haymitch."
Or
We're not
literally,
doing that.
like, if you, like, find it hard to read nonfiction, there are so many, like, podcasts or even, like, left-wing videos on YouTube and stuff like that that have really great introductions to learning about this history and things like that, where you could start small. Like, you don't have to learn the entire Bolshevik Revolution and, like, why it happened in the history of Tsarist Russia to why the people in the USSR decided to do what they did. Like, you don't have to learn every single beat, but even just learning, like, the highlights of them and, like, using that analysis in your real life and using that to teach other people that, hey, maybe, like, not everything that is the way it is now has to continue to be the way that it is now. Like, just starting and looking more and getting around people that you know more than what you know and learning from them, that's, like, one of the most important things you can do. And I like that messaging that ends up happening too, because there's, like, a scene where, like, they're like, "Oh, what we need is education." I don't remember who says it. I think it's Plutarch to
I really do.
Haymitch?
Plutarch is always throwing the seeds of like consciousness at different people throughout this series. Mainly it's just this in the Hunger Games trilogy.
Yeah.
He makes a good point at the very end with Haymitch acknowledging like what do you have to lose. So it's like
And
what
he's
Huey
like,
P. Newton with the Black Panther Party presented with revolutionary suicide. Or there's other instances where they're talking about propaganda and Haymitch is revisiting his games, and it's like what Naomi Klein talks about in the book Doppelganger, or Michael Parenti in Inventing Reality, Noam Chomsky in Manufacturing Consent. Like all of these things, these are all real things that have been happening historically. So I thought it was really nice. It was a very nice touch to see some sort of background.
yeah. Which, I mean, like, I do think that this, like, objectively is, like, I wouldn't say, like, Suzanne Collins' like, most, like, political novel because, like, the way the Hunger Games are and stuff, but this is, like, I feel like the most of her actually, like, kind of putting her 2 cents actually on stuff because, like, even though the Hunger Games are the way that they are still pretty ambiguous at the way the ending is, and kind of even throughout where it's just more like, oh, like very big government bad, sort of like as the overall messaging. Where I feel like this one is a little bit more like talking about like solidarity and like there's more of us than there are of them ideals that are focused a lot more than in this novel than there are in the Hunger Games at all, I would say.
Yes, I did appreciate like the opening songs you're getting from the Covey
Hmm.
and not Lucy Gray. What's her name?
Lenore Dove.
Lenore Dove, that's right.
It's Lenore,
Um,
not Lenora. Lenore.
Lenore
Yeah,
Dove.
nevermore.
But there's like a song. There's a song where they're talking about like the haves and the have-nots. Like it's very. It reminds me of the old Union songs
Mhm.
that you would hear from like Pete Seeger
Yeah.
or something like the almanacs. I can't remember their whole name, but like it's like that. That's what they kind of stand in for. And I know a lot of people were seeing a lot of connections to Appalachia,
Yes.
which Kristen lives very close
Yes.
to the Appalachian Mountains. So this is probably
All
more
of Eastern
materially
Yeah, all of Eastern Kentucky is
representative
coal.
that you would
Yeah.
recognize.
Well, because, like, I don't technically, I live outside of Appalachia because I live, like, more on the northern side of it, but, like, since I do live in Kentucky, I am able to see, like, everything here is coal-powered. Like, everything that we have here is from, like, the coal mines in Eastern Kentucky that people go and do all of their stuff in, and so, like, a lot of, like, the scenery and the way that it is, and the way that Haymitch's, like, family dynamics and, like, the people there remind me a lot of, like, Eastern Kentuckians and things like that, which brings me to the point that I know, like, me and you kind of, like, vaguely mentioned whenever we were talking about, like, our surface level analysis of this, where I wonder if, like, the liberals reading this would view like, they have to know that, like, like, this area is conservative, right? Like, conservative because they vote red. And so to liberals and, like, people that don't have a full understanding of, like, the way that, like, gerrymandering works or redlining or anything like that, how they understand, like, these people here would probably be like, "Oh, I voted for Snow," or something like that, if there was any type of, like, election in Pan Am, right? And so it makes me wonder that if, like, liberals are like, "Oh, well, they would deserve what they're getting." Because that's what
It
their
does feel
view
like
of
that
what.
because a lot of these people who are like our modern day liberals would probably be the people that are in the lower classes of the capital.
Yes. where it's like F you, and like not even like necessarily F you because she's like, oh, like it like keeps our safety or whatever else, like whatever they're propagandized to believe. But it's like she has that idea where she's like, oh, like we need the Hunger Games to continue existing, where it's like a lot of liberals are like, well, we need capitalism to continue existing for what reason? And then you have Haymitch where he's like, okay, I'm not talking to you anymore because what the fuck are you talking about? Sort of idea.
Haymitch's whole character throughout this, I think that was like what I liked the most is a very good balance between like a Gale and Peta.
Yeah.
He has so many like sweet moments when he's talking about Lenore Dove.
Yeah.
But then the sauce and the actually I really
Attitude,
wish
yeah.
that Snow would be put in a grave.
Yeah.
It was just it was such a nice, refreshing thing, and I wish I would have seen more of this from Katniss
Yeah.
earlier on. 'Cause she's a little bit more passive, but it was nice. I think that characterization was super nice, and also seeing that he was not into alcoholism super early was
Oh,
a
he was a
very nice
bootlegger.
social commentary. That he was a bootlegger, right?
And apparently people
But
online are
it really goes to
saying that what Haymitch was making was vodka. No, he's making moonshine. That's what is made legally in some places, not legally in other. You don't know what moonshine is?
why did they think that he was making vodka?
Because it was white
Do
liquor.
they not know of anyone
Yeah.
the moonshine is? Have you ever
Yeah,
tried
I know,
like,
I tried
anybody
moonshine,
that
I can
lives
tell you I tried it.
in a rural
But
area,
that's
you
like what
know
yeah.
someone who knows somebody, right? Wink, wink, that may or may not have
One
dabbled
time
with
at
this
Tyler's
creation of
mom's
this white
work,
liquor.
they brought so what flavor was it? It was supposed to be, like, strawberry or something, and I'm gonna tell you right now that shit did not taste like strawberries.
It's effective.
I mean,
It does
not
what it claims to do, but
yes.
moonshine is so that's how you know, like, a lot of these people must live in, like they must be city
City
slickers
folk.
because
City folk.
that is moonshine.
Yeah. Well, that's like what I was saying. I was like, "Oh my god, people are thinking that this is vodka? Ain't no way, honey bun. No." That's why
This is the shit that you're
it's
making
gonna
in
put
your
something that's putting
bathtub.
hair on your chest, buddy.
That's so funny.
That's so
I have not seen that coming.
yeah, I saw a thread or whatever, and they're like, "Y'all think it's vodka Haymitch is making? No, that's moonshine." Like, no, literally, like Eastern Kentucky, that's moonshine.
Oh my god.
Which I'm guessing
Okay, that's
she
for me.
probably
That
can't say. Like, I wonder if because it's YA, like she couldn't be like, "Oh, he's making moonshine," because like mentions of alcohol in that way.
yeah, probably, but also it's like the champagne in high fantasy novels.
Oh yeah, where like
Maybe that's why to unimmerse your readers by, like, referring to something very
because they probably don't even
specifically.
have France anymore in Pan Am, huh? Even though they drink champagne, don't they? I'm pretty sure they offered some type of champagne to someone at some point in
I they
throughout the Hunger Games.
Yeah,
They had
I
to
think
have,
you're right.
but yeah.
What was I to say? Oh, but while we're on the topic of alcohol, I think Haymitch's alcoholism is a relevant theme because of the way that we are able to see that people who abuse substances are not just people that made a decision
No,
to do it, right? They are using them as a means of coping.
coping
Anyone that works
mechanisms.
with harm reduction or has studied harm reduction would know that that is what's happening.
No,
And I
yeah.
thought that was such a really important point. I haven't seen a lot of people talk about it, but in society, this is a really important thing when it comes to the decriminalization of drugs across the board. Why it's so important is if you can resonate with Haymitch's character and be like, oh, yes, it's very
I see
sad
why he started
that he had
drinking.
to. Yeah, same. I
Yeah.
probably would have too. But it's
I
a
would've
way of
just gone
choosing.
out
They don't
back,
have
bro.
healthcare there.
I would've gone
They
out
don't
back.
though, like,
Yeah.
it was such a good means of they are very early on were talking about how, like, there's no, like, healthcare, and
No,
it talks
because
about,
they use
Katniss's
mother,
mom,
yeah, as, like, the closest thing they have to,
right?
like, a healer, and I wonder if it's because like, we already know that, like, District 12 is the poorest district out of all the districts, but I wonder if it's also, like, having to relate, like, to maybe they do have some type of healthcare, but nobody can afford it because of how expensive healthcare has gotten as well, like, the idea because we know, like, already now, like, in the stage of capitalism that we're in and living in the United States, so many people now are avoiding, like, getting healthcare treatments because they just can't afford it if they don't have insurance, or even if you do have insurance, you still can't afford it. I don't know if you saw that TikTok of that guy where, like, I guess he had to take an ambulance or something, and the ambulance ride was, like, 200 something dollars or whatever, and then he was called his insurance company, like, got his insurance put on it, and it went up, the pricing did, so then he ended up having to pay more for having insurance, because before you get a discount for not having insurance. Where it's like, how does that even make sense?
Like, to an extent, I can understand. There is, like, at hospitals when you go in, like, it's for people that don't have health insurance, so they aren't hit with those things. Because if you have insurance, if you have decent insurance, right, it's supposed to it's like a double-edged sword, right? Because it helps people who don't have insurance, but if you have insurance, you get frustrated with that, and then either you have a choice of either getting mad at the system for the
Mhm.
way it's set up, or you can take that anger out on the individuals who don't have health insurance and
Which
blame
is
them
what ends
as
up
the ones
happening.
who right? Which one ends up happening the most? I'll let you be the judge of that.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't really know because again, like, we there's not really, like, the most, like, governmental, like, things that we kind of end up learning about is just, like, the tesserae and, like, the way that that works, I think, with, like, people deciding to put extra names, extra drawings in the bowl basically to get, like, year supply of grain, flour. I think is that it? Something else probably, I'm sure.
Like the essentials, that people use to cook,
Yeah.
sustain their own existence, right? The means of
But
subsistence.
it's not even, like it's not even enough for that because, like, it's not like because Hamish talks about too about how, like, his clothes are ending up being made out of, like, the sack that they give the grain or whatever to him too, so it's like they're not giving any other type of, like, value in that way where, like, people still need clothing, and I wonder how, like I I am really interested to know how, like, people pay, like, if people have, like, in like, especially in the seam stuff, like, if they're having, like, bills to pay for water or anything like that, you know? Because it doesn't like, that's never really talked about.
They must, unless
Yeah.
it's all, like, in one thing, like, you have to do, like, your service for the mines or whatever, like, it's not again, this is the issue with Suzanne Collins not completely fleshing out the economic aspect,
Which are
which other
really
people probably
important.
do not give a shit about, but they are important factors to take into consideration. I don't know if she was just acknowledging the pants being made out of flour as a means of like a callback to like the 1920s. I think that's what it was when on flour bags and stuff they would have like like you could use them and turn them into like toys for children so you could like sew them
Oh,
up and like turn
like,
them
they would
into
have
something.
patterns.
I yeah, they would have like a pattern on the outside because it was like a malleable
Yeah.
fabric.
Which I
So I think that's what
you
that
think
was
that
supposed to be for, but I don't know.
but we don't really get those well, because, like, it's kind of implied, though, that nobody else is wearing, like, anything like that either, though, because, like, Haymitch specifically is like, "No, my mom, like, reuses everything." Like, we are getting, like, what something's worth out of what something's worth. And I think that really does, like, show, like, people that do struggle with, like, income inequality specifically and, like, lower income, they push things until it's falling apart, like cars, furniture, like, that stuff doesn't get replaced for most people that are living, like, in late stage capitalism until, like, you don't have a choice anymore, you know?
It's also true. What else did we wanna talk about? I think, it would be a disservice if we didn't discuss B.
Beatty and Ampert.
B and his yes, Beatty and Amber and his punishment for what he did. This is also good insight. If you really enjoyed the series, this was a non like what do we want to go? What were we fan
Corny?
service. This is
Oh,
not
fan.
fan service.
Oh.
I didn't think it was super corny. It was more so like showing like even if you challenge the status quo, like there's punitive justice. And I thought this, if we were to compare it to say what is happening with Mohammed Khalil right now, right, who
Mhm.
is a activist for Palestinian like for, free Palestine, right? And
Yes.
now is being risked
Detained,
or threatened, I guess, detained and potentially being
tortured.
forced to I don't know if they're being tortured right now,
Could be.
but I mean,
His
it
lawyer's
depends
not
on how
able
you
to find
define
them.
it.
I mean, he obviously has no contact with his family, and I feel like that's some type of torture within itself. Your family has no idea where
Right,
you
so it may
are,
not meet,
so
like, state
they might not be, like,
definitions,
putting a
however,
gun to his head, but, like, obviously he's still, like, not able to have a full communication with, like, the people that you love and the people that surround you.
which is kind of crazy to see what's happening, and the reason I
Yeah.
bring that up is because I was reading an NPR article about this. It just came out, like, 6 hours before filming this, and they're kinda just talking about how, like, the current legislation is, actively scrubbing references of transgender people,
Oh, and gay
from the
people,
Stonewall National Monument, and Black Lives Matter,
they're getting rid
Plaza
of
was being renamed or repainted, so I do think it's like, there is some modern day connections that can be made with, like, the way the propaganda functions,
and
but also, I think we should look at some of these characters and the way that they are being treated even though, like, they're standing up for what is correct, like, this is happening right now, and it has been happening historically. This is not just because Donald Trump is in office.
Fred
This
Hampton.
has been in the works. Yeah, Fred Hampton, prime example.
Yeah,
Huey P. Newton,
prime
prime
example.
example.
Yeah, literally.
Assata Secure how to go to Cuba. There's so many
Yeah.
like that you can reference and bring up. It's eh, it's hard. It's hard reading this and then like seeing people make
Mhm.
connections to real life and it's we
People
stumbled
don't fully
across
connect it.
somebody that are they see the propaganda that is happening in Sunrise on the Reaping and their first thought is, "Oh, this is literally like communism." And
Yeah,
I don't
people comparing
why that's your first thought unless Red Scare propaganda is just so deeply seeped in everyone's brains that they can't look and reflect on their own reality. They have to look into what they have been propagandized to
that's what
believe.
it's so confusing to me too, where it's like, this is directly like it takes place in the United States. Like, President Snow is like a fascist president specifically. Like, he has president in the name, whole idea. And then people are like, "Oh, but actually this is talking shit about the USSR." Like, where
I
are we
don't
getting
know
that
if they
connection?
think that like what this is happening like in this is actually what would happen if like the United States became communist because of like,
That's
oh look,
and that's like my main
they
critique with
don't
like the
have
Hunger Games.
access to clothes, they don't have anything. It's like this is the
Everyone's
problem.
equally
Is because
poor, like Head Atherate,
yeah,
which is like that's why I think it's so frustrating for Suzanne Collins specifically whenever she like makes these direct like things where it's like obviously she's talking about capitalism, obviously she's critiquing capitalism, but what word will she not use specifically in her books? She'll use propaganda just fine. She'll use other things. Well, like she means capitalism, like whenever she's talking about this. Whether or not I don't know if she like subconsciously realizes it and doesn't fully, which is why like that, or if she's aware of the way that like propaganda and things like that work, and she can't specifically spit it out. But I feel like with the way that you are, like once you have a big enough platform, like this book is selling out, like this book is popular, like Suzanne Collins, you will always be famous. You can start talking shit about capitalism. You can. Plenty of people do it, and
because
we
like
need more of that.
move away from the populist arguments, just like the big versus little. I acknowledge that it is class exploitation.
Yes.
At minimum, you can do that.
Yeah,
You can do that and not be considered like a Marxist Leninist tanky like that. You can use that term.
but if you wanna be a Marxist-Leninist tanky, nobody's gonna stop
I
you.
wouldn't be offended.
Maybe you could write some better books then. Like, not talking shit about these, but, like,
If
they would
she
need
just like
maybe
outward
6
said it,
stars
6
reads.
Starbucks.
Yeah,
No, literally 6
$6.
Starbucks.
Like, and it's just, like, that's what's so frustrating, I think, about this is that it's so close. It's, like, right there, and, like, so many people just, like, read these and they read them wrong because they're so, like, they're vague if you're
If anyone
unaware.
if anyone is like, "Oh, reading is subjective, you can't read it wrong." You are extracting, like, reactionary themes out of these. So, yes, you are reading it wrong because you have been propagandized
And that's the
just
thing.
like the people in the Hunger Games, and you haven't actively worked through it, but yet you wanna sit on a soapbox and say these things publicly on the internet and be like, "No, this is what it's about." You haven't done the work. We have,
Yeah.
and this is not a moralizing thing. We're not trying to but, like, there is an appeal to authority that can be had here with the people that have been taking the time to actively unlearn these things. It takes a lot of time and dedication, and
And we're
I'm
still
tired. I'm
unlearning every
tired
day
of being treated
too.
like shit. Yes, it's a continuous process. You
It's
will
a
never be
journey.
done because there's so much. But God forbid the
Yeah.
people who have a little bit more, who have been working through their Red Scare propaganda they've been taught, shit, like, there's things that I'm still finding out, and I'm actively reading, like, 40 plus nonfiction books a year. I learn history actively, and there's so much, and this isn't a moralizing thing, but I'm begging people just to take a step back.
Yeah.
Take a step back, put the brakes on before you like, actually, no, just think about it,
Just read
please.
something else, like, besides just The Hunger Games, because I think that's all you guys read, to be honest.
Please don't just read fiction books. They're great. They're great to have conversations with people
I
who are
love
not
fiction.
hashtag woke.
Yeah.
Um,
Hashtag
but
woke.
y- it cannot end here.
Even if
And
it's just,
if
like,
I have to go through the 2028 election cycle, and somebody's like, "I'm literally Haymitch,"
I think the thing is too is you don't have to read history books either. You don't have to read just history books. You don't have to read, like, physical books. If you're reading, like, Marxist articles or things like that, like, where it's, like, people are writing, like, articles from Marxist perspectives about, like, current world issues, even if you just read those, that is a step better than only reading fiction books.
would have to agree.
Like,
Just get off the NPR.
yeah. Like, go to
Watch
Marxist.org.
some Hassan
Yeah.
for if bare minimum. Just start listening to some stuff that like Hassan says, which I have my crits of Hassan,
Yeah.
but the book, so, please, please, that's better than what a lot of y'all are probably doing right now. That are just reading fiction exclusively.
And,
It's
like,
a good step.
you can
Hakim on YouTube
Hakeem.
is great. There's so many good I don't
Hakeem.
know how to say it.
It's Hakeem.
That
I like
one.
Hakeem as well. Or, Socialism for All, which he typically does, um,
Those are so good.
like,
They
theory
really are.
reads,
They're
and they're
fantastic.
really nice because he does, like, he reads the book as, like, an audiobook format, but then he'll also, like, put in, like, his own thoughts and opinions on what he's read and how he's analyzing that and explains it, like, much like a teacher would. And you don't have to, like, go through this by yourself. Even if you, like, read a message like me or Mariah and to be like, "Hey, I read this paragraph in this book. I didn't fully comprehend it." Or even anybody else that's, like, in your stuff. We like everyone that's, like, what analysis is. People are pulling and taking different things that they read, and they're having their own different personal lenses reflected off of those. Like, people read stuff, and that's, like, why there's so many different even analysis of, like, Sunrise on the Reaping, where it's like, you can read this and be like, "Oh, yeah, like, this is communism," where it's like, those are the people that don't have like, they have a very narrow-minded view, that's why they view it that way. While if you're somebody who, like, declares yourself as, like, a leftist or, like, whatever else where you wouldn't consider yourself a communist or socialist or whatever, and you read this and you're like, "I can understand these things," but you want to know more, ask people around you. Like, it's like the first step to, like, the world that, like, me and Mariah envision is, like, building a strong community and, like, uplifting the people around you. And the problem is too is that I think a lot of the times people are against building community with people they don't like.
I don't think they know the difference between, like, coalition building and building community.
Yeah, because, like,
Like, you can they have different, like, obviously, everything has meaning, but a lot of the people in your community are not gonna be on the same level as you. You have to meet people where they're at to
yeah.
a degree, right? There is some hard lines in the stand. However, just because somebody doesn't pass, like, your litmus test doesn't mean you shouldn't, like, work with them one on one and kind of challenge their beliefs
And that
until
doesn't
they're kind of at a point where then like, okay, let's go out and go do this.
yeah, like, people, like, and that's the thing, like, we're all exploited. That's the thing. That's something that, like, every single like, obviously not every single person in the world can relate to, but I literally, there's more of us that are being exploited than those that are doing the exploiting. And 9 times out of 10, your coworkers, your neighbors, the people around you are also being exploited. And so being able to talk about just like worker exploitation is such a big step to even discuss like, hey, I think we need a union. Like these are like literal beginning steps where you can start working with this and talking about people and getting their opinions, engaging them, and then you can learn from these things and how you can apply certain things that you know throughout like history and things like that. Because like me and Mariah were all at the point I know like originally whenever I start like basically not like deconstructing capitalism, but like realizing that like, hey, like capitalism is a big issue. I was still one of those people that's like, yeah, but the USSR was still bad. And like, yeah, the DPRK is still bad. Like you view this stuff because that's what you're taught. But then once you truly learn, it's like, yes, the USSR compared to like modern day technology and modern day comparisons, yeah, it probably sucked fucking balls. They didn't have fucking smartphones. Of course it fucking blew. Like, you know what I'm saying? It was not a perfect place. It's not like heaven to us or anything like that. But viewing what they have changed, where they were able to like increase people's literacy rates, where they got rid of like homelessness and things like that. Like they've done like material changes for the people that live there. You can just look at those like simple material changes and be like, hey, I want that for my perfect society, you know?
I yeah, like honestly, working through your Red Scare propaganda that you've been taught is a crucial step
And this book is
in
like
your
literally
class consciousness.
I think this book is like a great primer for that too because it's like realizing especially you read this and you're like, "Oh, like not everything we knew about like the Hunger Games or the revolution that happens in like Mockingjay was like, it did not just come up out of nowhere, like, these people have been working behind the scenes for years and years and years, you know? Like, you can see, like, Haymitch had like, he had these original ideas where he was like, "I want to destroy the Capitol, I wanna ruin the games, I wanna blow up the arena, I don't want these things to continue anymore," and you have people like Lenore Dove that were literally like, "There's no reason for these things to continue to be doing this," and she was a very radical person that was like, the only reason why you view it as like these as being a necessity is because that's all you know, where you don't have the stories of like your families, like with the Covey and stuff where they talked about like how free the world was at one point, you know, which is like again, we can talk about like how free like the United States was like at this point if this is supposed to be the time that they're romanticizing as well, which I feel like could definitely probably be an argument for the way that Suzanne Collins writes is the way that like they look back on the past as like being like because there's that scene where Plutarch is like, "Oh, what happened once?" Where it's like we were a true democracy at one point, and then something happened, and now we're not a true democracy, which is like that's where like I think Suzanne Collins' liberal mind kind of takes over.
Yeah, the idea that a settler colony like the United States that it was built upon the genocide of the indigenous people and the subjugation of the Africans that they brought over here and the enslavement for the development of American capital, like it gives that she hasn't unpacked all of that because it makes you wonder. It's like obviously there's something going on here.
Yes.
It's way too connected to the United States. There was no way that this Pan Am was never not a settler colony. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
it's just not.
So that's the thing. That's
I
why
need a complete, like you know how there's, like, the indigenous people's history of the United States? I need that for Pan Am. If she's gonna, like, full send,
is she gonna write more?
write it up, girl.
And I guess that we can move
Oh,
on to
100%.
like
It's profitable. I don't know what else you wanted to discuss, like, those were, like, the main points.
I think what we could talk about is maybe what we're expecting for the Hunger Games if there is a future to being more Hunger Games. Because we just talked about too, learning that there is a Hunger Games theme park. They've obviously already announced this book and movie simultaneously, which is a very interesting choice to do because how often does that happen? Where we can see that the thing is that like the Hunger Games are obviously like a very profitable thing. So do you think that Suzanne Collins is going to keep doing things about that and like the ramifications of that because of like the idea that like the capital and I've already seen like so many people where they're like, oh, like Susan Collins can never stop writing. She could write a book she can write basically, I guess what we have four Hunger Games that follow like a specific Hunger Games. So that means she has 70 more other books hypothetically she could write to just go into all those games? And then at what point does that make you different from a capital citizen that is wanting to read these books as entertainment instead of viewing them abstractly as what they are and viewing yourself as like, oh, I'm in the capital while I'm wanting to read about children suffering for fun?
The only thing I can think, this was a question that I brought up in the last one, is like, what is the utility of telling a story where you're having very graphic depictions of children being killed, whether it's because of retaliation from a parent or because of just the way that the games are structured? How are you using that as a vehicle for social commentary? Like, is the social commentary worth it? At what point do we need to move away from these and just start studying history in any means that we can, whether that's reading or listening? Like we've already discussed, like there's got to be a point. These are great, but if she's not going to have more radical politics being brought in that are just overtly themed, and she's stayed so apolitical and
Publicly,
not saying anything about what's going on in the world, which I find that very strange that she's like, no, I'm just gonna let the novel do the speaking for me. That doesn't
doesn't
sit right
work.
with me. When, especially when there's authors that are being like vehemently um anti-Zionist, right? Like they
Yes.
are doing that. They are being, they people are mad. They don't want to like realize, I guess, that like this is a real thing. People are losing like their degrees for standing up
Yeah.
against the genocide against the Palestinians, which like authors are doing that. They're going on the front, like they're doing these things, and she's not.
Yeah.
And I think there's a tremendous amount of privilege as her as a white author who has a multi-million dollar franchise like the
Yes.
Hunger Games.
And especially if you're going to
I
have a
don't know.
series that's so, like, rooted in, like, history and things like that, because, like, we know that the original Hunger Games were based off of the Iraq War and what she was viewing on television while also, like, switching through reality TV, and about how, like, the channels are just able to, coexist with one another, where you have one side of people that are viewing this objectively horrible and violent thing happening while other people are able to just, "Oh, like, let me watch this Big Brother or whatever," and you're able to sit there and choose to ignore it, and I think it really does, like, directly show, and I think this, um, book almost does a better job of showcasing that, like, the people in America now are the capital, or, like, citizens of America, where it's like, and I wish that, like, even, like, I think in A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, because we do sort of see that, but it doesn't go in enough, where there are poor people in the capital too. Like, there's not, like, it's not homogenous all rich people, you know? But they are indefinitely more privileged than the people of the districts objectively.
I hope that more people will take that away, at least from this, is that you can apply this in terms of geopolitics and understand that the way that the capital is exploiting the different districts and the people like living there. You have to understand that that's also the utility of US imperialism and neocolonialism that is happening actively. So you should rethink how you view different revolutionary or opposition movements happening in the periphery, and think how like the US media is presenting them and whether or
Mhm.
not it's truthful. Like CNN, we're talking Fox News, we're not like NPR, even like some of these really big name like MSNBC, they have an agenda. And
Well,
this isn't like sound like fucking conservative. Hold on. I know they say that, but like they do genuinely, like the people at the top
they have their
will only let
biases.
certain stories get published if it's framed a certain way because of the people that are funding these news stations. They're not funded by the government. Like,
And that's the thing
yeah, there is somebody that owns them.
too, with, like, specifically, like, with, like, we can look at, like, propaganda now, and the way that, like, the Democrats don't even have to do, like, their own propaganda either, because, like, regular people do it so well for them, where they're sitting here and, like, people love to talk about, like, how oppressive the Trump regime is, which I'm not saying it isn't, and I'm not saying that they're not bad and what they're doing is shitty and terrible and wrong. But then people also wanna ignore that, like, Biden in his last couple months of his presidency signed, like, one of the biggest anti-trans laws in years. And it's like, okay, so we wanna talk about that as well, like, in relation to why, like, Republicans and Democrats are virtually on the same page, but then Democrats are like, "No, we're only talking about it now because Trump is doing it." Where it's like, no, like, with, like, NPR and things like that, where y'all are able to criticize things that are going on under a Republican regime rather than under a Democratic regime whenever we need to be critiquing it all around.
I think it's because the class element is kind of sidestepped, and the us versus them is the Republicans versus the Democrats. It's not a
Yes.
class-based antagonism. And to understand, it's like I don't know how people can understand. They grasp that like Coin and Snow in the Hunger
Are
Games, right?
both
That
bad.
Cordon's too soon. They're equally bad. They can, but they can't see that in terms of like U.S. political parties. Like
I think it's because they
it's a
view
two-party duopoly.
well, I think I wonder if it's because District 13 and Snow is kind of end up viewed as, like, almost as, like, the Stalin or, like, that sort of, like, true communist, and then, like, we have our true capitalist of being Snow, and that's why they're both, like, two evils where it ends up being, like, horseshoe theory sort of thing, where they see, like, oh, these two opposing sides, where if we have something in the middle, like the Democrats, which, like, they view the Democrats as being the middle because they only view extreme right and extreme left as like their whole idea of like what the political spectrum is. And they're like, okay, well, we can't have extreme right, we can't have extreme left, so the Democrats are what's in the middle. Whenever we know objectively, like they are not. Whenever you have a much broader scope of politics outside of just the US, which, like, yes, the Democrats are the left if you look at only US politics, mainstream US politics, I would even say, not even just like any of the other parties that are in the United States.
So that's our recommendations,
Yeah.
is to really reflect on the dystopian novels that you're reading and understand that we're not saying don't read them, but all we're saying is don't only read them,
Yeah.
especially if they're giving really heavy-handed critiques
Current
on the
society.
society we live under right now.
Yeah.
So that's I hope the takeaway people have. I hopefully in the future, whenever we make another the thing, there'll be like academic articles like there was for the Hunger Games and stuff. I do think people are going to really reflect and work with the text, but
I wish
that's my hope right
people
now. I
did
don't
it.
know about the movies and shit. I'm gonna pretend that that's not a thing.
Yeah. Um, I really wish that was something that was done more with other series and other books too, because I feel like The Hunger Games is like one of the few that we really see so many like academic articles, while there's other just as political books that we've read and talked about in this that don't get the same amount of hype and like analysis that these do.
Next time we end up, well, we have one book coming up for the book club that will I think is gonna have something. So I'll look through
Yes.
like Google Scholar and some other like scholarly websites and see if I can find anything that's analyzing or working with them. I would love if anyone writes books or reviews or scholarly articles for like dystopian novels. I would
Let us
also love
know.
to see if you have like a
And
Substack or if you publish them.
if you're somebody that is like adamantly only fiction, I will give you one fiction rec that'll be the gateway to what you should read next, and it's Changing All Stars by Nana Akwami Brinya, Ajay Brinya. I think that is his name.
Struggle saying that name every single time
It's
it comes
four
up,
names. I
but
can't
I think that's
remember.
close. Yeah, it's Nana
Kwame.
Kwame Brinya.
Yes, and I think that is a much better version. If you want your 6-star version of the Hunger Games, like to be like so basic on what it is, that is it. And it actually does like a true like left-wing analysis and critique of the US prison system. And it does it in a very similar style to the way the Hunger Games is presented as like a reality show to the privilege, while this is exactly that, where you get those same main beats, but this is truly like there's no way you can cut this any other way, like ends up happening with the Hunger Games trilogy and the Hunger Games books, where they end up being like, well, either way, we don't know. Where this is very much specifically like, no, this is from like a communist perspective, an abolitionist perspective. So yeah.
That's better. Hopefully, okay. So nonfiction books that were recommended during this episode: Mark Fisher's Capitalism Realism, Huey P. Newton's Revolutionary Suicide, Naomi Klein's Doppelganger, Michael Parenti's Inventing Reality, Noam Chomsky's Manufacturing Consent. I also think honorable mention Franz Fanon, The Wretched of the Earth, and Rosa Luxemburg's Reform or Revolution are also very necessary reads if you were looking for something.
Yep.
Check those out.
All right. Thanks for listening. Next week's episode will be The Maid by
Very different change of pace after all of this.
yeah. Back to our regularly scheduled content where it'll be 2 posts a month again. But we're doing The Maid by I don't know who wrote it. Do you?
It's like Nita Prose, I think.
Something like that. Yeah. And the third one of that's supposed to be coming out soon. So not that we're reading all of them. We're just reading the first one. So but yeah, so catch that next week's episode. Other than that, I think that's it. Don't forget to donate to the mutual aid group that I am linking below. And thank you.
If you
And
want to read along with us,
on Fable for next
Fable,
yes.
Lit Lib Pod, and you can read Severance by Ling Ma.
With
So
us. Yep. Other
that's what
than
we're reading
that,
in April.
thanks for listening and thank you and good night.